We'll start off with the police and fire retirement board. We're going to call a meeting to order at 6:56. And we only have one item on the agenda. That is to review and approve the normal retirement of Lieutenant Willis Sagowski, effective September 1st, 2022. Can I have a motion, please, to
whether or not you want.
review and approve the normal retirement of Lieutenant Sagowski? Bruce Ryan makes the motion. Second. Nick Russo seconds. Sure. Let's,
Whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which, as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say yes. You guys have been with Euclid since 2015, and I think, unless I'm incorrect, and you can correct me if I am.
normal retirement.
Hey, Chris, this is Jared. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. We're doing
Whether or not you want.
retirement for police and fire right now, which you're on as well.
Yep.
Okay. You have any questions on it, Jared?
I don't. Nope.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no questions. Any comments? No comments? All right, hearing none. A vote for approval. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all those against, nay. Nays for visit.
Whether or not you want.
Retirement of William Sagowski to approve.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Need a motion for adjournment. Brian, motion for adjournment. I'm calling for second. All those in favor? Aye. Everyone, thank you very much. Ended at 18:59. 6:59.
Whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which, as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say yes. You guys have been with Euclid since 2015, and I think, unless I'm incorrect, and you can correct me if I am. Hello, this is Matt Ringland. I'm calling in from RT Specialty to discuss fiduciary liability.
Hi, welcome. We're gonna begin, we're gonna get going in just a
Whether or not you want.
minute.
Okay.
Just mute your phone, and we're just waiting for a couple more members to join us.
Will do. Thank
Eric Newman is on.
Okay, Eric.
Oh, okay. We have a name. I don't know who Madeline Katz.
Whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which, as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say yes. You guys have been with Euclid since 2015, and I think, unless I'm incorrect, and you can correct me if I am.
Four, right?
Those pensions, they were good to make it hard for everybody.
My wife's an equity analyst, and he took me Times Square to be at McDonald's to pretend to be a McDonald's worker. And all this analysts still around, trying to educate people, all got fired. They both around.
Love those shows, like when you bring the bosses in.
Yeah, same idea.
Whether or not you want.
Percent?
Love this.
Chris, we're at 5. Okay.
Thank God.
You're good?
Those three shows
We're good.
episode, they get something.
So Madeline, do you want to?
Whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which, as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say yes. You guys have been with Euclid since 2015, and I think, unless I'm incorrect, and you can correct me if I am.
So I'm mixing it up a little bit here, guys, for you, so don't get too distracted. First up, we'd like to hear about our fiduciary insurance policy. And to that effect, we're being joined, our host, and I'm sorry, we did not hear your name when you came into the call, and I'm hopeful that you could please, give your name to us again so we can put that into the minutes.
Yeah. Not a problem. Whether or not you want Ringland.
We can't hear on here. I'm sorry, say it again.
Matt Ringland. The spelling is Ringland.
L-A-R-I-N.
Whether or not you want. ND.
Land.
England.
Okay. That one's louder. It's
Thank you.
louder.
We're turning down the AC units here. It's like being in an old 1950s hotel, right? Where you got like this big machine and it's making a ton of noise. So
We'll keep on putting in quarters.
oh, here we go. All right, now we can hear.
Whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say, yes, you guys have been with Euclid.
We go Q&A. Our overarching question is to kind of understand kind of what the best in class is right now for fiduciary insurance. This affects us as board members. This affects the town, obviously. And we would just love a little bit of color and perspective of what type of coverage you believe is most adequate for a board like ours.
Yeah, so I'll kind of jump in and then if you want, whether or not you want questions, by all means. The current program you're in is with Euclid. Euclid is a high quality insurer that specializes, this division specializes in fiduciary liability, including governments and municipalities, whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say, yes, you guys have been with Euclid dollars, and the policy renews on 9/14. The policy currently covers you as fiduciaries. The plans, which are we have listed as the employees retirement system, as well as the police and fire retirement system. And I think that last year those contributed to the around, let's call it, rounding up 400 million in assets. Whether or not you want. Essentially, the fiduciary program is designed, again, to protect municipal and governmental benefit plans, as well as the administrators of those plans. As you may be aware, if a claim is brought, whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say, yes, you guys have been with Euclid and damage coverage, so indemnity coverage to the plan itself. So, and defense coverage to those fiduciaries. That's kind of the overall arching view of what a fiduciary liability policy is designed to do. Again, protection of the fiduciaries that are administrating, as well as the plans themselves. And I know whether or not you want, actually Rob O'Connor had made me aware that there was a potential Ponzi scheme that you guys wanted to potentially discuss with Allianz that might have been in the neighborhood of $8 or $9 million, but you guys were able to recover those funds, which whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say, yes, you guys have been with Euclid. And we do have options to potentially increase that to upwards of, if not more than 10 million. Obviously, that will those conversations will take place as we go through the renewal process. Again, you are with Euclid. They do have specific policy language directed at governments and municipalities. So they are, like I said, the gold standard for whether or not you want a product. I think one of the things that was also brought to my attention was your desire to know where you guys stand in terms of purchasing limit. You know, how do other municipalities stand up? So I have two sets of whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say, yes, you guys have been with Euclid. And as a result, we do capture a lot of data with regards to limit purchase. Unfortunately, that limit purchase isn't specific to municipalities or governments when speaking about fiduciary liability. But at your current limit, based on the data that we have internally, you are in the, I think, 30% of the overall purchasers of plans that administer, whether or not you want $1 million, purchase at least $5 million in coverage. When talking to Euclid, who will have a better set of data based on their expertise in underwriting this information, as well as that data capture for government entities, whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which, as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say yes, you guys have been with Euclid. $1 million in coverage. The first quartile is $5 million. So you guys, as it currently stands, would be in the first quartile. The median for this is $10 million in coverage, and the maximum that they've seen is $30 million. So those are kind of the data facts that I guess I'd be working with as well, and that usually you guys will be considering in terms of whether or not you want to increase those limits, as well as whether or not figuring out if this is currently the right plan for you, which, as it stands without seeing any renewal terms, I would say yes, you guys have been with Euclid since 2015, and I think, unless I'm incorrect, and you can correct me if I am, your comfortability with obviously administering the plans themselves as well. So yeah, absolutely.
What happens if our assets? What happens once our assets are more than 500 million? Does that change the coverage levels that you would think about?
So unfortunately, my data just goes up to 500 million. I can talk to Euclid to see if they have additional data past 500. Like I said, internally, I only have data up to 50 million plus. But above 500 million, I can see if they have any data on that, but it might change the quartile a little bit. It would depend on how much you have. If you had $1 billion in fiduciary, I would imagine, yes, that would change your outlook to how much limit you would want to purchase. But then again, it also depends on your comfortability with obviously administering the plans themselves as well. So definitely different risk factors to weigh. Not every plan or every fiduciary is equal, if you will. But I can get back to you on terms of if it's excess of 500 million, do they have data quartiles for that I can also share?
Digest them, and if the questions are clear, and then we will take those on later. If they're unclear, you can push back and say, Tom, my name is Tom, by the way. You can say, Tom, what the hell did you mean by that? So let me just give you the questions, and then as I said, you can either push back and say, what do you mean? Or I'll write them down and subject to the concurrence of the group, forward them to you. So
if you have a laundry list of questions, probably the most efficient way to get those answered, because it will probably also involve working with the underwriter directly, would be to get those over to the agent, to me, and we can answer those appropriately. That said, I'm happy to try and field what you may have that you feel is pressing, and see if we can get those answered right now.
All right, we'll tell you what, let me ask the questions, and then you can digest them, and if the questions are clear, and then we will take those on later. If they're unclear, you can push back and say, Tom, my name is Tom, by the way. You can say, Tom, what the hell did you mean by that? So let me just give you the questions, and then as I said, you can either push back and say, what do you mean? Or I'll write them down and subject to the concurrence of the group, forward them to you. So I had a couple questions concerning claims. What's the range of claims made? I'm thinking about penalties and legal fees along the way. And how frequently are these claims made? I don't know how to measure that, but maybe you or your resources have a way of getting back to us with how common are these settlements and claims across the U.S. for municipalities, to be clear. So that's Are those two questions relatively clear, or do you want to push back?
No, I mean, I will have to talk with the underwriter on that. I don't have a data set that we don't have, something that I could see if I could figure out getting over to you.
I see the policy as a claims made policy.
Yes.
Is that market standard, and does that mean, as I understand it, to research? On Euclid, do you have I looked up Euclid a couple meetings ago and I saw they were an AM Best single A rating, I think. Is that the only rating out there? It's the only one I could quickly find. And do you have financials on Euclid?
So it's Euclid, and they write on Hudson, and you're correct. They do have an AM Best rating of A. I do not personally have the financials, but that's, again, something that I could see if I could figure out getting over to you.
I see the policy as a claims made policy.
Yes.
Is that market standard, and does that mean, as I understand it, we have to have made a claim during the policy period in which to be covered? So hypothetically, if we made a claim tomorrow, we're covered by the policy, it takes years to settle. I assume Euclid or Hudson is on the hook down the road because we made a claim during the coverage period. Alternatively, if we didn't make a claim during the coverage period and it came to our attention, I guess if we made a claim after the policy period, we would not be covered by this policy period policy.
That's correct. So standard is claims made in professional liability and management liability. Occurrence is more of a GL product. But you are correct in your understanding. Claims made means during the policy period, you make a claim. That claim and any claims,
Legal fees and penalties.
the nexus of that claim would essentially be directed back towards that policy.
Legal fees and penalties, I assume, for staff and board members. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah.
And the 5 million or hypothetically 10 million, if we were up the limit, that would be applicable to all staff and all board members, I assume sequentially. So to the extent that anybody got personally on the hook.
During a prior covered period.
And the policy, again, I read it a couple of meetings ago, covers legal fees and penalties, I assume, for staff and board members. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah.
And the 5 million or hypothetically 10 million, if we were up the limit, that would be applicable to all staff and all board members, I assume sequentially. So to the extent that anybody got personally on the hook, that person.
Severable. So the facts that essentially it's no facts pertaining to or knowledge possessed by any insured will be impugned, and there will be endorsements in the policy that reflect the government and municipality exposure.
When you mentioned the cap.
See if I can find it quickly. It would cover spouses, estates, legal representatives. It's pretty encompassing. The one thing that I would say to that, if there is a bad actor that is criminally negligent, the policy would essentially not cover that criminally negligent individual, but the policy is also severable. So the facts that essentially it's no facts pertaining to or knowledge possessed by any insured will be impugned, and there will be endorsements in the policy that reflect the government and municipality exposure.
When you mentioned the categories of plans by asset size, you've mentioned gold standard twice. What do you mean? I'm just curious what you mean by that. I mean, I know it means good, but what exactly do you have in mind?
Is that they are they're specialists in fiduciary liability. They do specialize in government and municipalities as well. Not every market is a specialist in fiduciary. Fiduciary is sometimes a throw-in coverage, if you will, for management liability programs, and there will be endorsed. Not everyone writes a standalone fiduciary program, and if they do, they might not focus on municipalities or governments to try and broaden the coverage specifically for those exposures. Euclid has, and there will be endorsements in the policy that reflect the government and municipality exposure.
When you mentioned the categories of plans by asset size, you mentioned that 30% had 30% of plans over 50 million bought at least 5 million of coverage. Carolyn, our chair, was asking about how would you feel about 500 million. I think if I could build on that, we're pretty close to that. So 50 million seems like a very low threshold. And I guess the
Dollar data points.
the question, what do plans with roughly 10 times that asset level typically have, and what's the range?
Right. So
$50 million
go ahead.
plan, which was Carolyn's.
So
point.
the $50 million data points are driven by internal data from RT. I had also mentioned that Euclid has additional information, broader information, where they're looking at plan assets between 250 and 500 million. And based on their data set, which is obviously much more in line with what we would be looking at for you, the first quartile is buying $5 million. The median purchase for, again, plan assets between 250 and 5 million is 10 million. The average is 11.6. The third quartile is 15, and the maximum is $30 million. So if you had $500 million, the median, again, would be a $10 million purchase coverage limit. That is a limit that recommend probably for this at least $10 million. That would set you at the median. It also comes down to purchase power, right? And again,
Scribbled this down. I couldn't read my own handwriting. So if the range is 250 to 500, we're still toward the top end of that range. And if the median or the average, they seem to be pretty close, are 10 or 11 million dollars, and the max is 30. I would have thought you'd be, maybe you are, recommending closer to $30 million in coverage, so that we're in line with plans towards the upper end of that range.
So I would recommend probably for this at least $10 million. That would set you at the median. It also comes down to purchase power, right? And again, the comfortability you guys have as administrators of the asset size is probably warranted.
Okay. I'm pretty much, well, I've asked all the questions. Obviously, some of the answers.
The exact number of how many plans Euclid looked at. Actually, I do. It's 4,500 employee benefit plans is what this data set is capturing. So your average of 4,500 is, let's call it $12 million purchase. So I do believe that increasing your limit structure based on your growing asset size is probably warranted.
Okay. I'm pretty much, well, I've asked all the questions. Obviously, some of the answers I'll write up and send with the approval of Carolyn and the board. Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, you're welcome.
I heard
Matt.
Ringland.
Matt, Eric Caliper here. I was speaking with a broker earlier. Is there an opportunity here to layer the policies, to cut the expense to the board? Is there an opportunity to buy a policy from 1 to 5 and then from, let's say, 5 to 20?
1 to 5 and 5 to 20. So traditionally, if you can get 10 million, The cost savings of layering the programs is probably not as great, as well as the fact that they are now dealing with 2 carriers. Now, we tend to work with fairly reputable carriers, so I don't think claims handling would be an issue in doing that. But if you're able to get 10 million and the cost differential is not all that great, it's probably recommended that you take that option.
Some of the experience you've seen with cyber claims, and I see that our sublimit is at $100,000. Have you seen claims higher than that value in your experience lately?
That you currently purchase 5 million. If you wanted to purchase 5 million with Euclid, but then you wanted an additional 15 million, the recommended way of doing that would be to structure it by adding 3 additional carriers at 5 million, not 1 additional carrier at 15 million, because no carrier would want to sit top heavy over a much more limited primary exposure. So there potentially could be cost savings.
Some of the experience you've seen.
I think that if you're able to get a primary 10 on this, it would probably behoove you to go that path. That's not to say that we wouldn't, look at potential alternatives for you.
And can you speak about a little bit some of the experience you've seen with cyber claims? And I see that our sublimit is at $100,000. Have you seen claims higher than that value in your experience lately?
So the cyber coverage on this should not really be taken as you have true cyber coverage. It is a throw-in, nice to have sublimited endorsement built into the program. In your fiduciary, excuse me, I'm not your agent. I'm just the broker on the fiduciary, so I am unsure if you have. Let me see. 1 second. I don't think we used to write, if not still do, the cybersecurity. So you should probably have a standalone cybersecurity policy for the town of Fairfield. I would not hang your hat on the $100,000 sublimit in your fiduciary policy to cover you in the event of a cyber claim. It is wholly not enough and not broad enough of coverage to really warrant, I guess, further discussion outside of you should probably have your own standalone cyber coverage.
Thank you, Matt.
You're
Any
welcome.
other questions?
I got a question.
Yep.
I didn't know, I'm sorry, I apologize, if this was covered.
For the town of Fairfield.
In our policy, who do you take direction, who does our policy take direction from? The chair of the board, or are we tied to the town? Who's paying this bill? And, if there ever, a claim is ever made and, potentially the town has a different perspective on this, how are we covered on that? Where do you take the direction from on the claim?
So it's a duty to defend policy for the town of Fairfield. So who ends up paying for the claim for the policy itself? So that's a little bit outside of the scope of who provides direction, who submits the claim, but it essentially is the insured. So the insured is, in this case, the town of Fairfield. I'm not sure who in particular would be the representative. The board, I would assume, would be the representative for the town of Fairfield as fiduciaries. And they would essentially be working with the insurance carrier on a claim settlement or defense.
Is that standard, though? Is it that the town is the insured body, not the board specifically?
So the board is covered under the policy as the
Right,
plan
I understand.
administrators. Yeah.
But what
So-
was ever a situation where the town was upset with the board, that we're bringing the action against the board?
That's a good question. I will have to get back to you on that. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear it, sorry.
I said, what if the town was making the complaint against the board? If the town is paying for our coverage, but it's the town that feels the board acted inappropriately, not anyone else.
Well, if there's a lawsuit, and maybe I'm understanding, but if there's a lawsuit, we as directors of the board would be personally sued, it's my understanding.
By the town. The town feels that the first selectman says, hey, I don't like the way the board handled this situation. We're liable for, now the board is liable, but the town's paying the bill for the insurance.
So you as a fiduciary, the administrator should be covered by any person,
Attorneys to work for the,
entity that has standing to make said claim. But I don't know how the interworkings would be should the board and the town.
attorneys to work for the board on behalf of the board, and we have the ability to do that. But I understand your
The
question.
example that came up recently before Madoff was the Allianz matter. And if I understand the situation there, I think Carol, you were deposed. And hypothetically, the town could pick up the legal representation for Carolyn. Or hypothetically, there could be some kind of dispute, some reason that I don't understand, where the town says, you know what, we're not going to represent you, you're on your own.
Well, in that case, we, the board, hired attorneys.
The board hired.
The board hired attorneys to work for the board on behalf of the board, and we have the ability to do that. But I understand your question, Chris. I don't think that situation has been kind of articulated in this policy, but we can certainly find out. Right? And the way that we handle contracts with the town is that we enter into all contracts. That was us.
I got you.
And the town was brought in at the last minute in order to help bolster the board of the pension plans. We have the ability to go out and hire outside counsel, outside services. But the contracts that we enter into all generally go through the diligence process on the part of the town.
Understood. I just didn't want, again, like the Allianz situation where, the board attorney, the attorney for us is actually taking direction from the town, not from us directly. And I
Yeah,
would never
and in
want
that
to
case,
be-
in that case, the attorney for us was getting directions from us. That was us.
I got you.
And the town was brought in at the last minute in order to help bolster our claim, which was a productive, had a good outcome. But the council worked for us. All right, well, I'm gonna end it there. Thank you, Matt.
Again, thank you for the time that you allowed me to share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your night. Bye-bye.
See you again. It's getting hot in here, guys.
So what's the next step? I'll volunteer to do some work.
Right on.
I'll
Yeah.
put together.
Up for renewal in September. I think this is very timely. Right? So we will,
Yes.
we'll circle back on that during the week.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
Thank you for allowing me the time. Please submit whatever questions you may have to Rob O'Connor, and we'll try and get those answered. And then the renewal off to you, obviously, in time for the 9/14 renewal date. Outside of that, again, thank you for the time that you allowed me to share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your night. Bye-bye.
See you again. It's getting hot in here, guys.
So what's the next step? I'll volunteer to do some work.
Right on.
I'll
Yeah.
put together a list of questions.
Relevant assets with about 3,000 participants. And they range between 5 and 15 million. And they gave me 5 different plans that had $5 to $1 billion in assets, from 300 and more. And those also range from 5 to 25. So it seems like 15 and 10 is like that sweet spot. And he said that he did know of one pension board, which was still receiving action in Texas. The board made a change.
See, or we can call special meeting very quickly. What we've learned.
I can share with you 2 things. Number one, I think that we should reach out to IT about the cyber part.
Yep.
That seems like a whole separate policy we want to search for online,
Okay.
separate from the sharing insurance. The second thing is that went to another broker and gave me some sample RPs. I don't know if we need to do that, but he gave me some data and it seemed like it assets with NAPA reporting. So they offered 3 plans that had 500 million in assets with about 3,000 participants. And they range between 5 and 15 million. And they gave me 5 different plans that had $1 billion in assets from 300 and more. And those also range from 5 to 25. So it seems like 15 and 10 is like that sweet spot. And he said that he did know of one pension board, which was still receiving action in Texas. The board made a change to the benefit program, being sued at this date. They have like $4 million. Still that's,
Wow.
I'm definitely gonna ask about the loss experience. That's a big great. It's a great, it's good to know.
Okay.
Data point.
Yeah, well, so stay tuned for a special meeting, right? So we can make sure that we're appropriately covered. Right, that sounds really helpful. Would you like to work?
Carolyn, where does the
Yeah.
fund, where's the funds come from? From the pension
Period.
My understanding it comes from pension. But to be confirmed, right? I don't know if Jared's on. We have the CFO report in here. I don't think it's see if he can say. Yeah, fiduciary liability.
I'm on.
Hey, Jared,
I'm on. What's the question?
where's the funding come from for the E&O or D&O insurance? From the town or from the pension plan?
It comes from the pension fund.
It's right there.
Your coverage for, and I should say our coverage for the board comes from the pension fund.
All right,
Money.
good copies. No. When you are ready, if someone would like to make a motion, please. Floor over to you. I think, do you want to change seats with me so you're closer to the speaker?
I did bring some handouts, but some can be interested. And on this first page of this handout, is our analysis of the plan's current allocation.
Right.
Good thing we're well paid to do this.
All right, guys, we're gonna move forward here. Let's go on. We got a busy night.
On this, give us a sugar.
We got an exciting night here. Next up, we're just quickly, let's do the minutes. To hear and consider and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the June 22nd meeting that we had. Chris sent them around earlier. I hope everyone's had a chance to read them. Yeah, and I have a hard copy, but when you are ready, if someone would like to make a motion, please.
make a motion that we approve the draft minutes of the Wednesday, June 2nd meeting.
Okay, we have a second? Jim? Rep? Ted? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same? Nope. Okay. Passes unanimously, Chris.
Thank
All right. All right, guys, this is the big moment. Look, we've all been waiting for it. Most exciting moment of the year. Here we go. This is our inaugural review from our new actuary, Milliman. He's here to wow us. Jennifer Castellano is here with us. And I will turn the floor over to you. I think, do you want to change seats with me so you're closer to the speaker?
I did bring some handouts, but
Love hands.
we don't have that.
No, Megan was just here.
They'll have.
Where was it, Mary?
All right.
Thanks. All right, Jen, take it away.
So thank you for having me here tonight. It's good to meet everybody in person, finally. We're going to talk about the interest rate assumption for the pension plans, healthcare plans as well tonight. As you know, it's been a crazy 6 months in the markets, and used your investment allocation for developing our recommended assumption for interest rate. And on this first page of this handout, is our analysis of the plan's current allocation as of today and what the resulting interest rate assumption is recommended. Up top is a bubble graph that represents the different asset classes that you're invested in. A larger the bubble just means the higher the exposure to that particular asset class. And we have expected nominal returns along the left-hand side and your risk standard deviations on the x-axis. And that black dot in the middle is your entire portfolio. This is based on Milliman's June 30th, 2022 capital market assumption, so it does reflect everything that's happened in the last 2 quarters, so the previous 6 months. I'm sure Ron will attest to as well. But taking all this into consideration, down the bottom graph, look, you know, 5 to 30 year horizon. And in any given year, you know, investments can be volatile, and you've seen that in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, you had a 20+ return, and this past year, you had a just about -8% return. So that's just volatile. It's probably smooth assets. But so in any given year, it can be very volatile. But over a longer period of time, that tends to balance, the big 10 balance out will converge towards 50%. And we tend to look at a long horizon because pension obligations are long-term in nature. So, you know, whereas investment consultants may look at maybe a 10 or 20 year horizon, we like to look at 30 years plus. Now, these are both closed plans, so as they become more mature, we will shorten the horizon of time, but right now.
One of them is not closed. Please confirm it's not closed.
So, yeah, you're right. The town plan's closed. As it matures, we might shorten the horizon. For right now, 30 years target. And on that basis, our estimate of the long-term rate of return over a 30-year period is about 6.9%. Now, last year, I came and told you that ours was about 6.1%. It's a very big, significant jump from last year. There's 2 things driving that. One is that your asset allocation changed slightly from last year to this year. You did increase your exposure to private equity. So that helps to bump it up a bit. But the bigger reason is what's been going on in the markets for the last 6 months. And I'm not going to get to that because I'm not the expert. Brian is the expert. I believe his assessment would be too much in line what I'm seeing. So we're at 6.9% as our test. What our analysis supports. You're currently at 6.9%. So in reality, you don't have to make any changes. I wouldn't recommend increasing. This is a data point. We don't know what the future is going to look like. But you could also consider being a little more conservative and making a change and decreasing. That seems kind of crazy in the environment at the time we decrease the interest rate. Well, one reason is, at least on the town side, it's a closed plan, and we will start to shorten that horizon. So you can see for shorter periods of time, there's a cycle. You have a shorter period of time to make up potential losses. So, but my recommendation for this year is to sit tight, hold up 6.9%, see what happens with this. On to page 2, we're asked to just, we did this last year as well. This was we put together a sample of comparative towns, Maricopa County, what their funded ratios are, as well as the interest rates that they're using for managing their liabilities. And it ranges from about, just over 6% to about 7.25%. Most of these plans are fairly well funded. If you plans, the pension plans are fairly well funded, but it seems everyone's kind of riding in the mid 6%, 6.5%, 6.75% range. So you're not too far off. Your plans are well funded. These funded ratios are as of June 30th, 2021. Given the market performance for the last year, I do expect, even if you keep interest rate the same, I do expect those funded ratios to go down slightly because the core investment returns for the last year.
That's the possibly naive question. What's the philosophy, and maybe this is for the board, behind having OPEB funding ratio so much lower than, well, having it low is so much lower than the town that police and fire?
It's because OPEB plans haven't been funded for as long.
Building up.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So on to the last page, where we put together some estimates. This is what you can expect this year for as far as the budget is concerned. 4 columns of results here. The town plan's up top and the police fire and police plans down below. The first column up to the far left is just last year's results, reiterating just for a basis for comparison. And the next 3 columns are all 2022 results. All of these results reflect estimated liabilities. We have not yet collected the updated census data, so this is just an estimated liability, assuming all assumptions come true. And which is the best information we have at this point in time. The second column shows, it assumes that the assets performed exactly as we intended. So it assumes that the assets returned on a market value basis 6.9% during 21. And it's just to see what would have happened, what we expected to happen. And as you can see, your actuarial determined contribution actually went down from last year for both plans. 5 million down to 4.2 on the town side, and from 6.7 to 6. As we all know, in reality, the assets did not perform very well during the fiscal year end of 22. That's across the board. The plan had about an 8 to 9% return, and that's pretty consistent with all my plans. I've received asset information for this year, so it's pretty much right in line with everyone else is experiencing. Okay. But we do smooth those assets. So we're not recognizing that total, that higher loss all this year, just 20%. In reality, this loss is basically just wiping out the gains of the partners. Just those are just completely offsetting each other, and you have some small gains and losses on different right now. So as a result, the impact is not nearly as dire as we would have expected it to be, but it does still lead to an increase in actual return. It's $4.9 million on the town, for the town plan, and 6.6 for the police and fire plan. Now, year over year, it's about 11
Yeah.
dollar amount. So that's good news. Granted, we just love to see what happens on the liability side. There could be losses that push that up more, or there could be gains that might bring that back. And then just to show you some sensitivity analysis, we did run a 6.8% interest rate assumption just to see what a 10 basis point change would do in the contribution. You can see on the town side, it increases it by about a little over $300,000. And it's on fire side by just almost 1. If you do go further, it's fairly linear relationship. So each 10 basis points, you expect the increase to be about the same. So I'll stop there. Looking forward to any questions.
On funded ratio, on the second page, that's the. We have 95.6. Then on the last page, it says 9.4.
Yes, so on page 2, this is the information for all of these financial reports, the audits. Those are the market value basis. So it reflects the 100% of that big gain from last year. Whereas on the third page in the first column, that's on an actuarial value basis, so it's only recognized 20%. So your actuarial value of assets is lower. On July 1st, 2021, the actuarial value of assets was lower than your market value was because we didn't fully recognize change.
That's moving. It's moving.
No, I just think I have.
Tough to not recognize it all last year, but this year you're glad.
Yeah, glad to smooth.
You know, so it helps to, as you can see, you're staying fairly level year over year. That's the whole point. This is to reduce the volatility of the contribution. It's not the point.
So I have, the one question that I have is we're using a 6.9% discount rate, interest rate assumption for the pensions, but 7 for OPEB.
Right.
And
I believe the intention will be to drop the OPEB to 6.9% this year as well.
Yes.
This is the first full valuation. It's a 3-year cycle.
okay, so that will be reflected in the valuation you're doing, because it was my understanding that when we voted to lower that discount rate a year ago, we did it for both.
Yes.
years. Okay,
He's haven't done a full valuation since.
okay.
To import, to adopt it, so.
So it is.
It's 6.9, yes, so,
I always thought they were the same.
yeah, they were the same, but they only get found, OPEB only gets valued every second year. So we'll pick it up this one.
So we don't have to.
No, we don't have to vote to change that. So, does anyone have any thoughts or questions? You guys on WebEx able to hear, okay?
It's not a very important question, but I'm just curious how you came up with your
Other sound vehicles coming.
towns, the mediums,
Yeah, there's somewhat similar to some. They were in house, transition.
So it's long been kind of my view that it would make sense for us to kind of hold, sit tight on that 6.9, allow a couple years to go by. Let's see how that works for us. And I mean, your math certainly seems to prove that out. And Vanguard's analysis supported us kind of every few months and showed us kind of proved that out. I'm curious if anyone has an opinion other than sit tight, hold the 6.9.
Has it been this board's position to listen to the recommendation?
Yep, the nice thing is now we have two, we have two advisors. We have Vanguard does this math and helps us with this and our actuary helps provides good support.
Yeah, we provided some information in the last meeting, both using our capital market forecast. That was as of March. And then we also did some similar analysis, plotted it on one page about funded status and discount rates in other towns, but that was in last month's study. Not hearing any discussion about changing this. This one follow-on question. Discount rates is one lever. These other levers, wage inflation, COLAs. Have you seen any other pension boards mitigating those other levers this year?
I've seen a lot of boards review COLAs, but not many actually take action. Because they're in a high inflationary environment, but in this data for time, so we've done a lot of work to review COLAs. You have a COLA in place, standing COLA. Some communities that don't have a good impact. Scrutiny, but no one is taking action.
That's a procedural question. I think Eric picked up on that a little bit. Maybe my own confusion. The chamber is responsible for access. And then to
Correct, we deliver liability to the town.
Right.
Right, and then it's the town's responsibility to work with the Board of Finance to determine how and when and whether they're going to fund that liability.
So to Eric's point about the COLAs, that's the board's selectmen and they board of finances.
Well, not necessarily.
See if I can answer.
Yeah.
Some COLAs were established, for trust, it's fire, there's the town side, others are attached to their actual bargaining. So it may be different for when the retiring time or she retire, what bargaining unit associated with plans. So it is very. There's not one COLA across the board. I can tell you what this fire is, that's different than.
Right. And I believe we're 5 unions between the two, police and fire and the town pensions.
So I guess my question is who votes on a change in COLA?
So typically those things would need to be done by the plan trust, collective bargaining agreement, that's what those change. There's no action typically taken by the pension board. I believe in the last letter that went out, resources consults with somebody and gets the letter out and it's determined to increase.
We provide that information. It's based on CPLC.
The
From you.
the other sub levers right, that we in the past have discussed have been, inflation rate, the mortality tables, right? And, any embedded interest rate assumption, right?
So, and there are other demographic assumptions. that we think about that, and leave it there for instance.
I wanted to ask you exactly that.
So it's something that we can work on this year or next year, whenever the board sees fit, or the town sees fit. Now, well, that was a liability, only sitting on the table now. And recommendations are.
How many years?
The best practice recommendation is every 5 years. By the GFO.
It's been 5 years already.
I believe it has. I mean, I haven't been on board that long, but I think.
I have not gone through an experience study, so, and I'm 4 years old. So it's probably time for us to request an experience study.
I don't believe that was a part of our proposal, but we can.
Yep. I would welcome that proposal. And we'll work with Jared and the town to understand that, but I think we want to stick with the 5-year cadence.
So yeah, we'll take a little extra work this particular time against that, but historical data that we normally would have to the normal course of figuring out what the plan and get another moment in national per year. It's not the work with each other. Or so.
Okay. All right, anything else on this, guys, just for discussion standpoint? I'm wondering if it makes sense for the benefit of posterity for us to take a vote to keep the discount rate, or does somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we keep the discount rate for all pension funds. The open trusts at 6.9%.
Second?
Second.
They're both at 6.9. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Unanimous. Are there any, opposed or abstained? Look that way. All right, passes, carries unanimously. Thank you. Nick, the reason why it says that 7 on that paper is because the OPEB work is only done every 2 years. And we made the change last year, so it's just an artifact hanging over. So. Right. Yep. All right, Jen, thank you very much. I would just, I would like to say, every quarter I have to share this presentation to the Board of Finance. And this last quarter, I was before the Board of Finance, and they sang Milliman's praises. So the work that you did for the Board of Finance was very well received, and you have some very happy clients.
It's always received.
It's hard to get. Right?
And you know who was the praiser?
Yeah, Mr. Wall.
It was Mr. Wolf.
Double kudos.
So, nicely done. All right, we're moving on, guys. That was easy. We can move on to, Brian, you ready with Vanguard?
Yes,
You need help getting the slides up?
I'm ready. I don't know. I don't know if everyone has them on their desktop or we need to get them up. I don't know how to get them. I've never put them up on the screen, but I think Jared's done it in the past.
We can share them on our various laptops here.
Okay. Well, there was 2 main topics that I had as far as the presentation. I wasn't gonna go through all the pages. But just to set it, I'll give you a quick recap of the plan, the performance through 6/30, the pension and OPEB performance through 6/30. And then the main discussion point is to revisit the private equity allocation. We did that about this time last year. I'm sorry, not the allocation where we have a 10% allocation to private equity, but the ongoing cash flows or the ongoing commitments to make in order to build to that 10% over time. And so I have those slides in there as far as the cash flow modeling. They're roughly in line with where we were last year as far as what we were projecting. But we look at it each year because
Are you referring to a particular slide?
I'm just telling you about what I'm going to talk to. Just so performance, private equity, and then I did put in information about Harbor Best, the Vanguard Harbor Best Fund, because I know that everyone was part of the board. So I wasn't going to go through the Harbor Best slides again, but put them in a reference in case there's a question, and certainly for the commissioners that haven't seen. So with that said, Tom, yes, let's just go straight to page 4. And I think this will be the main page that I'll hit on as far as reviewing performance, since it very much echoes the performance that the pension plan and OPEB plans have experienced. So the big catchaway is like, it's really one of the worst starts, its first 6 months of the start of the year for any major indice. And even if you look at fixed income, you know, the worst start since 1976, but I think it goes well beyond that as well. So the numbers that you see on the page, as far as the equities, this is a year-to-date figure. I'm just looking at that middle column, the green column. So US equities down over 21%. Non-US equities a little bit better, but still down 18.6% on a year-to-date basis. And it's just really fixed income is where it's really caught all the markets by surprise. You know, down 10%. We usually don't see that. Bonds usually act as the ballast, like we saw in COVID, like we saw in 2008 crisis, but that has all been about inflation and then interest rates. And so as interest rates go up, principal kind of comes down. So US bonds down 10%, and not much diversification from non-US bonds, also down 10%. On page 6, I think this is always just useful to look at as far as the yield curve, and that's what's driven the fixed income performance negative so much. But really the curve, when I talk about the curve, it's the different interest rate along the maturities. And so it's very flat right now. In fact, you know, as we speak here in July, it's inverted, meaning on a 2-year, the 2-year yield is now higher than the 10-year yield. And that 3-month yield, which is more closely controlled by the Fed, has been continuing to rise through the year. And of course, we got a 75 basis point hike today. What I did include for perspective, just on page 7, this is more of a one-off slide, is just looking along the top column. It's very rare, I mean, to see stocks and bonds both negative. So just on a, you know, on a 1-month perspective, you know, it might happen every 14%. But if you go further to the right, on a 3-year basis, there's never been a 3-year period where stocks and bonds have both been negative. Even if you look at the 1 year, it's only 0.4%. So very, very rare for that to happen in conjunction. And, you know, just perspective as far as still staying with the diversified asset allocation. That doesn't change. The bright side. So let's get the bright side of all the negative numbers. And that's on page 8. And this is referring a little bit to what Jen covered. So this is not the town's portfolio, but it's just looking at different risk profiles, whether you're 30-70 or 70-30. And because equities have sold off so much, and because fixed income yields have pushed higher, our forecasts, our capital market forecasts for diversified portfolios are now trending upwards. And really, this is the first time in the second quarter that's happened in years. You know, since 2008, those forecasts have been coming down, 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 down. But now that valuations are a little bit more attractive in yields, so it's the dark green bar is as of May, our forecast. The light green bar what it was as December of last year, and it's really any percentile, any portfolio that's higher expected. So that really dovetails with Jen's presentation on the discount rate. So a lot of our forecasts would support that.
You think we bottomed?
Generally, no. I mean, a lot of the, you know, we came into the year with overvaluation. You know, the Fed is still increasing interest rates as they did today. And so, you know, there's usually a lag. There's an economic lag, whether it's consumers or businesses, and what that interest rate impact will have on businesses. And so it's all about, you know, monitoring what's the earnings impact going to be to these companies. So I mean, it's hard to say specifically, but I think the market is priced in the interest rate hikes to a certain extent, but we don't know what will happen from an earnings standpoint. That's still to be determined.
So if we were to assume that the Fed is trying to regress to the mean where the Fed should be, where is that mean? How far off are we from
Right.
in the last 10 years of an anomaly?
Right. So historically, the Fed has had a target of, 2% inflation. Now they moved towards a 2% average over years. But right now, like we estimate, I think the Fed is more like the 2.5% is probably that neutral rate. You don't push into recession, but you don't get too much inflation. But with that said, because we have so much inflation right now, the last CPI print was 9.1%, is that we can expect up to 3.5% by year end. The Fed may have to go to 3.5%, and maybe even further in 2023 in order to cool the economy, in order to get inflation under control. So we think they're going to have to go beyond that, what's referred to the neutral rate, in order to get there. And I think the market is pretty much sensing that, because if you look at the 10-year yield, which is a good barometer, that's been coming down. It's, I think as of yesterday, it was like 2.76. We were as high as, I wrote it down, as 3.49 in June. But that 10-year is more well anchored to what the expectations are over the longer period of things. So we'll probably still shift, and could likely see an inverted yield curve again, which I was referring to. Longer answer, but does that help? 2.5 is longer term range, but probably has to go above that in order to cool inflation. And the big piece is, the Fed can't do so much around commodities and energy, but it's the wage growth and the wage inflation that's really sticky, and it's more of a concern. So I'll turn to page 9 to review the actual performance of the plans. And again, highlighted some of this as well. So I'm looking at the 1-year number since the close of the fiscal year. So down 8.88% versus the composite benchmark that reflects your asset allocation targets of 10.42. So a little bit better. And that's mainly due to the alternative performance, the private equity managers, and also the private real estate that have both performed very well. Because the equity portion, the fixed income portion is all indexed. There's no active management there. Also, to Jen's point, I looked at it, what were we last year? So, we finished June of last year at plus 25% for the pension, plus 30% for the OPEB. So we certainly knew that wasn't sustainable. And the Bible says, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away, right? So, but we're focused on the longer term. We are at the bottom of this page, on page 9, still close to our policy targets. As a reminder, we're always using cash flows to rebalance the targets. That's our first measure. But we have pension payments that go out, and then we do have calls and distributions from the private equity managers. So those are the main points I had on with
So-
respect to the pension.
So in light of all of that.
Yes.
In light of all of that, all those dark green bars versus light green bars.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that we change the allocation at all? We had this conversation last month, and Bruce totally called the bottom of the market.
Yeah, we discussed it. I don't think much has changed from a one, month over month. We looked at increasing, it's called the equity risk in the portfolio more to 65-35. I think that increases a little bit more. There was some hesitancy that, that we are at the bottom. We'll never call the bottom exactly right, but I wanted to bring it up, and I can model it again with our June forecast, which will come out in August. To see if, that's something that will also get us closer to that discount rate of 6.9%. Talk about levers, right? You have your discount rate, you have really what you do with the asset allocation. So I really wasn't recommending anything different from just month over month.
But I'm always gonna ask.
Well, and lot to show the pros and cons of that.
Totally. And you haven't heard me say backwardation in
That's
two, not in 2 meetings.
Recommendations, recommendations.
They were right. Those commodities were right. Dr. Copper. Okay, sorry. So
No,
before we
no,
rest-
no, not at all. I think that should remain maybe an open topic as far as the asset allocation with respect to the capital market forecast and the discount. Nick, did you have a question? Let me just review the OPEB performance on page 13 and slightly more aggressive asset allocation, 70-30, they split between risk-seeking versus return-seeking versus risk-reducing. So on a one-year basis, it's down more than the pension plan, so down 11.08%, a little bit tighter versus the benchmark. We only started the private equity allocation last year, so there's not anything meaningful. We haven't any meaningful returns yet from the Harbor Best Fund.
I would assume, even though it's gone down a little more, it does, because it's farther out of the west on the risk spectrum, but of course, we recover a little bit.
Right.
Right.
Yes, yeah, it swings both ways. I mean, as I was talking about the numbers from last June, I mean, it outperformed the pension by about 5%. So not surprising to see it down 3% versus this year.
Okay.
What questions are there on performance? Other than we all hope it gets better soon.
Well, I mean, the easy answer is always just to kind of hold firm, stay where you're at. And the harder question is, does it make sense to take advantage of this volatility that we've been through and think about the allocations overall? And clearly we're not out of whatever it is that we're dealing with.
That's right. I mean, clearly we still have high inflation. Clearly the Fed is still on the trajectory to continue to raise rates. And so with a lag, whether it's a consumer or business, we'll have to see what happens, as a result of those interest rates on really it's all about earnings.
Right.
But with that said, we've still seen a big downturn in the market. I think I'll have by next week, September meeting, where we are about where we think we are, the equity markets, how well valued they are. We were overvalued, way overvalued coming into the year. And I haven't seen an update from our team. My guess is that we're closely to fair value, but nothing like undervalued relative term.
Right, I've read that the private equity funding side, banking funding of private equity has collapsed. Is that about right? If so, what impact does that have on our increasing towards the target?
You're right, and I think we've seen that from those comments from Mesereau from Lexington, and I've shared some comments from Harbor Best. I think the way you see it is we may have slower distributions. Companies are not producing as much or not going public. So you might have slower distributions and possibly, slower calls. Maybe they're not putting money to work as fast. On the flip side, they may be putting more money. So I think the real impact is on the cash flow from the existing private equity managers.
I guess I'm more worried about what we're getting in. If private equity returns are actually falling and they're not being, they're slowly filtering through the reporting that we're getting in at a time when things are seeming better than they really are.
Yes, the comment that I shared last time, but we're at fall with Harbor Best, typically in these down markets is when they've seen some of the best historical returns from private equity, investing in times of stress. Valuations, are certainly coming down for private equity companies just as much as they are for public. So some of their best returns have been in times of stress like right now. So related to that, if I go to page 20, and there's a lot of numbers here, but it's because it's reflecting all the calls and distributions across all of the managers. I'm just going to stay on the top row for simplicity. The last year, for the 2021 vintage, we committed 30 million. And based on the updated cash flows, we would say the appropriate allocation to make to the 2022 vintage would be 25 million. And that's consistent with the forecast from last year. What we're modeling here with the calls and the distributions, if you recall, is to try to get that allocation to 10%. And we don't want to do that all at once because you want to have diversification from year to year because you see different deals come to the market. So page 22 is a visual that kind of helps us to see that. The black line is really the dollar amount needed to get to a 10% allocation. That gray bar is slowly going down. That's the legacy private equity managers. We're receiving more distributions than we are calls right now. Those are very mature. And so the colored lines are projections for allocations to each of the new annual vintages. And again, we'll take time. We're estimating it might be till 2027 that we get to a 10% allocation. Now, that's also a result of what happens in the public markets, or what we call the denominator effect, because as that gets smaller, the private allocations is bigger and vice versa. So that's why we're constantly updating the cash flow model with current asset values as well as calls and distributions. And for 2022, there's two more closings that HarborVest is doing in 2022, a September closing and a December closing. And so we'll just have to commit the dollar amount to them, do the paperwork again for the 22 vintage. Pension, as you just said, is 25 million is what we're recommending. And then for the next pages, on page 24 is for the OPEB fire and police. And then we have the OPEB employees, but for the OPEB fire and police in 2022, an allocation of 2.5 million. And in page 28, when I was looking at the employees, it's 1.8 million.
So you would need us to get the timing of this right. You would need us to vote on this ideally at the September meeting.
September meeting, yeah, I think October's cutting it too close to get all the paperwork. Yeah.
Okay.
So just to give you some dates, and I can work with Jared, but there is a September 23rd closing. All the paperwork would have to be done by September 2nd. And then there's a December 2nd closing, but all the paperwork has to be in to HarborVest by November 11th. So here I wanted to talk about and show the cash flow model so that then he has a sense of what we're recommending. And then we're off for August. So September would be a good meeting to approve that.
Okay. All right. We'll put that on the agenda for the September meeting.
Okay.
And we'll make their December deadline.
Yes.
Right, and what we'll want to discuss and vote on is the allocation amount,
It's
right?
the
It's
dollar
not the
amount.
percentage, it's an actual dollar amount.
Correct, yeah, I'm not talking about changing anything on the asset allocation. We're gonna build towards that 10% over time. And so it's the dollar amount, not changing the allocation.
Okay. Good. That'll give us a little more time to kind of digest this market. Okay.
And if there's any meaningful changes, we'll update this cash flow model.
Perfect.
Those are the main points, the main takeaways. There are slides in there about the market outlook, but I really kind of summarized the view. It's all about rates. It's all about inflation. And we talked about that, but I do like to put them in there for reference.
Anyone else, anyone have any thoughts or questions for Brian? We haven't covered or anything else? Nope. All right. Excellent. All right, then I think we also covered the point number 6 here on the agenda, discussion, possible vote on allocation adjustments.
Which last time?
An allocation change that we did? Oh, the last text from
Yes.
February? We did a small allocation change.
The asset allocation changes to the policy,
Yeah,
was this time last year when we approved private equity going to 10% of the OPEB. Well, OPEB had no allocation, and we increased for pension 5 and 10. So that was the last time that we did anything from an asset allocation a year ago.
the reason it's gonna be on the agenda is it is, a point of debate whether or not if we want to change the allocation, if we have to have pre-noticed, to say we might have a vote on the allocation. If we don't have it on the agenda, and we go to change it, we might not be able to change it, right? And so it's gotta be on the agenda. It's just,
Voting on,
it's a possible voting item.
when it goes to Mr. Baldwin.
Exactly. He and I have had the discussion about that, and so this was the solution. Let's we just keep that on the agenda. In case we want to move, we can move on. All right, CFO report. Jared, are you with us?
I'm here.
All right, would you like to run through the CFO items? Well, we're gonna turn off the air conditioning units in here so we can hear you. We are very high
Okay.
tech.
Yeah, and I don't have a lot to say about this. It's the report that you guys have seen in the past. You can take a look at some of the big numbers, including the employer contributions, which are just, what the town contributes to the fund, and then cash transfers in and out, which is the amount of money that goes into the funds account and out of the funds account to pay for the pension payments to the pensioners. One of the questions that came up was about the fiduciary liability, and you will see that on the pension side of things. You'll see the dollar amount that we spend for our fiduciary liability policy in here. Does anybody have any questions about this? I don't really have anything to highlight from here, but if anybody sees anything that sticks out that they have a question about, I'm happy to take questions.
Anyone have any questions? No. Very quiet crowd tonight, Jared. Okay.
All right.
I feel up to the challenge.
I love it, Tom.
Jared, I have a question. Are these statements audited at the end of the year?
No, they haven't been audited yet. So this is our internal books of what the what the report looks like right now, and they have not been audited yet.
So you say yeah, so that means they are going to be audited at the end of the year end, right?
They will, absolutely, they will be. Yes.
And they have been in the past as well?
Yep.
Who's our auditing firm?
It's PKF O'Connor.
Okay. I don't know.
Is that still Joe Centofanti?
It's Joe Centofanti. They, there aren't a lot of firms out there, as we discovered when we went out to bid for a new audit firm, and they were the only ones to make a submission. So, we are continuing with them over the next year. Through this next fiscal year, and then we'll go out again. Wasn't unusual this year. All towns were experiencing the same thing, where they were getting either one or no submissions from audit firms in the state, and so I think a lot of towns are in the same boat right now. And so we're planning on going out again, probably we're going to start a little earlier to see if we can get some more participation from other firms. there aren't a lot to begin with, but hopefully we can generate some more interest and get a little more competition.
Jared, I can hear in your voice, you're looking for suggestions, so I have a crackpot suggestion for you. Would it make sense, and the answer maybe no, to talk to, say, Westport and Darien and maybe even Bridgeport and say, would you be interested in going out with a joint RFP? If you're not getting attention for just the town of Fairfield, which is understandable, maybe if you did it with a handful of other towns or cities, you could get more attention, maybe working through GFOA contacts.
That is interesting. I would have to think about that and how that would work. And I'll think about it, and I'll talk to the other towns and see what their take is on it.
Just to cast.
And whether or not that might affect it.
We did this with neighbors buying generators, backup generators, and the plan just fell apart. So it probably won't work.
That's a good suggestion, then. You should have stopped while you were ahead.
I want to be honest. I don't want to send them off.
Look, you got in there and you asked a question. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jared. since
Yeah,
you-
one thing I'll add.
How much
One
did
thing
you
I'd like
raise?
to add is, we've used in Stanford, we use that particular auditing firm in the past as well, and it is a tight group that audits local municipalities. You're not going to get the big firms auditing local levels. They do the states. They do obviously public entities, but when it comes to the very local municipalities, it's a very niche and narrow market of getting auditors. So it's just something to add.
Yeah, and
what
if you
Kevin
look
was
at
saying.
all the different firms, there are a number of different firms, but they all seem to kind of focus. There are some that really focus on some of the smaller municipalities, and then some that focus on the larger ones, and then in between. And the ones that that really have a concentration on towns of our size, there are really not a lot of them.
All right. Jared, anything else from the CFO report?
No.
Susan has a question.
Have all payments been made to the employees that paid into the pension and then were not vested and left? A while ago, the HR director said that they found a drawer full of people who needed to be paid back. I was just wondering if all those payments were made.
All of the all of the money is obviously there, and if people ask for it, we will pay it out to them. I believe that there is still a number of people who have money that is there that to be paid out for them, just because of turnover and staffing in our HR department. We still don't have a full handle on it, but we just hired a new director. We will likely be having a new benefits manager coming in hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and hope to get a better handle on that and to push that money out to those people who are owed that money.
Okay, thank you.
But if anybody, just to be clear, if there's any retiree or any employee who has, or anybody who has left the employee of the town of Fairfield, when they come to us and ask us for whatever the money is that we have and that they're owed, we'll pay it out to them. So that's not an issue.
Jared, Eric Caliper here. I just want to switch gears a little bit. I thought I brought this up a couple of meetings ago. Two-part question. First part is, I'm looking at the employee contributions for the pension funds, and I noticed that they're only made in Q3 and Q4. So a little bit of insight on that. And I don't see any employee contributions for the OPEB Police and Fire Trust.
So the employee contributions on the OPEB side, those all get reconciled at the end of the year, and if there is a dollar amount of the amount that the town is supposed to put in compared to the amount that was paid out, then we make that difference up. In the past, there have been years where the payments out on OPEB have been greater than that amount, and there hasn't been a contribution. And so yeah, so that's what happens on the OPEB side. There's a truing up at the end of the year that happens. What we've done in the past is put money into it in the beginning of the year, just so that there's something there that is, gaining some interest, getting earnings off of that amount, and so that's what we typically do with it, to kind of anticipate that there would be a positive result at the end of the year. But again, that doesn't always happen that way.
So are you implying there's like a side pocket of cash that's not represented here?
Can you repeat that?
Are you implying there's like a side pocket of cash that's not present here? Like there's some other trusts that you're putting into and drawing off of for retiree benefit payments?
Are you talking about the OPEB?
Specifically the OPEB trust, yes. You know what I'm saying?
So in the
So the question is, right, the cash accounting for the employee contributions to OPEB, kind of the flow of cash. So does it sit in a holding vehicle before it's allocated into OPEB, or does it all go into OPEB and then there's a truing up at the end, a reckoning that you're doing to apportion it back out?
Yeah, there's a truing up at the end of the year that happens.
The only thing, and I think I sent an email to you before, I can't speak for the police union, but with the fire union, there should be two separate trust accounts. And those two accounts are established because one is considered a savings vehicle and one's considered a checking vehicle, and those two are supposed to be kept separately. I just want to make sure that, number one, I don't see any employee contributions here. So if you looked at this data set, you would say the employee would not be any contributions. That's not true statement. Second thing is that there should be two separate trust accounts. One is constantly growing and one is being drawn off of, and I don't see that here either.
Right.
I'll take a look at that again. One of the things that we're doing right now, to get a better handle on the really basic rules and regulations of the pension fund, is finalizing a document for our pension plan. We just finished a draft plan for the town side, and so the next step is going to be and that'll go out to the unions to be sure that there is a agreement on what those rules are. And so I'm hoping to have that out in the next week or so, so that everybody can look at it and make sure there's agreement. And then we'll have to do the same thing for the police and fire side of things, to be sure that everybody agrees on what's supposed to happen with those funds. It hasn't, there hasn't been a good fundamental document to work off of, and to, you know, determine what happens with these funds. And so that's where we're trying to get to. And so hopefully we have a good base to work off of now with the town employees, and can finalize that, I don't know, within the next month or two. And then we'll move on to police and fire to be sure that everything's being done the way that all the parties agree on.
And to think this out a little bit further, so, you know, if Millman is assuming a payment in July 1 of some value into the pension, the OPEB trust, assuming that value is going to gain.
Right, but fund accounting is a weird thing, right? Now you're moving into fund accounting.
I'm trying to make sure that what we're capturing with Millman is actually happening in cash flow in the trusts.
What?
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing.
It has to be. It
He's finished the budget every year. I mean,
I just don't see it.
yeah, on his sheet.
This is just.
Then his sheet wouldn't, you have to question the accuracy of it, but I can guarantee you it's funded in the budget, if that's the question.
No, I do absolutely agree. Yep, I agree with that statement. I'm just saying that I don't see the inflows here. And if the inflows are not in the trust, then we're not capturing the investment gains.
Well, so
Just to clarify, when you're talking about contributions to OPEB, you mean actual employees, not retiree contributions.
That's correct.
Still getting up to speed on OPEB, so
What
forgive me.
percentage is that?
It's not super common,
Oh.
so.
Over 3.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
I don't see that at all.
We haven't gone through our cycle. of
It's like
reviewing
the
that stuff,
OPEB to see that.
So I can't add much insight, to that.
Do town employees contribute too? No, just police fire?
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Do town
Well,
employees contribute? They do. Anyone who is eligible for the plan, they do.
OPEB, Jared. Town
I'm
employees,
sorry?
town employees don't contribute into OPEB.
No.
Okay. Well, I think, Jared, hey, this is someone in your office would probably have a handle on this, and we can ask. It would be nice for us just to satisfy our curiosity about how the funds flow, where they're held, how they're moved, and the timing around that.
Yeah.
So there are employee contributions, and for our reports, that would be reflected. Because it is an offset to the normal costs, so now we're an offset to the normal costs. So there's the employer contribution. down. So, and that's something that would come up in the natural course of order. We'd ask a question if we saw something that didn't go in line with our understanding of the contract. So as we go through the issues cycle, we're gonna, it's part of when you get a new actuary, you get full audit of kind of everything.
Okay. That's good. Well, clearly it's of interest.
I will make a note to pay attention to that.
Okay. Anything else? We good? Moving on to kind of the old business and the new business. Last month we talked about of the town having sent pensioners kind of a letter that was confusing. The advice piece, if you remember, and Jared this week drafted up kind of a draft of a letter that would come out from the town that we would sign together. So I'd sign it from the JRIB, and he would sign it, and the HR director would sign it. That kind of lays out some of the changes and explains some of the changes. So that's in the draft has been drafted, and it's almost at a point of completion. We look forward to getting that out.
To what, pensioners?
Jared, this will go to pensioners.
It's going to go to pensioners, and part of that will be, there'll be a few updates in there. One having to do with there was an issue that came up with because we switched trustees, as we talked about last meeting briefly. when there was the move to M&T, the new trustee, Wilmington Trust, when they sent out their pension payments, they included advice in there, and some of the pensioners were a little bit confused because the advice document that went out to them looked very much like a check, like a pension check. So people were seeing that that they had money going into their account for the pension, but in addition they got this check. It wasn't a check; it was advice. And so, you know, I've had a few conversations with Wilmington about that. They're going to continue to send the advice out, and the advice is a good thing. It's, you know, it's something that we've talked about in the past, and they're going to continue to send out advice with each of the payments. And now, now that we've gone through one cycle of this, hopefully it won't be as much a surprise to them to see this this advice document come to them that might look like a check, and they'll know that it's not, and it's just a you know, kind of an update of their account. And so that's one thing that will be in the letter, just to advise them, inform the retirees that that's what's happening. You know, we're also mentioning to them that we do have a new HR director, and that when it comes time to file taxes, they're going to get a couple of different W-2s, one from People's Bank and one from M&T/Wilmington, just so that there's no surprise there. So we're going to try to be a little more proactive now, so that you know, change is always difficult, and I understand the situation that retirees are in, and so we want to be able to let them know in advance from here on what's going to happen, so that there aren't any surprises or you know, things that might catch them off guard. So this letter will hopefully take care of that. In addition, there's going to be a document in there for them to submit a direct deposit form, so to be sure that that M&T Wilmington has the most up-to-date information about each of the retirees and their account information, so there aren't any difficulties or errors there with regard to processing direct deposits. So we will finalize that letter. As the chairwoman has mentioned, she's seen it, and I know First Select Woman has seen it, so that will go out very soon.
All right, guys. That's all I have for the evening. Is anyone else? Any other new business? All right. I might ask for a motion to adjourn. All right, Jim, a second? Bruce? All right, guys.
All in favor, everybody?
Thank you all.
Thank you.